up, everybody? My name is James D. Fiore, and this is Blackballed. Well, today, and this is really kind of interesting for me because, as everyone knows, I've been covering the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church, aka the Plymouth Brethren Crazy Cult, for the last, I guess, year and a half or so. And yesterday, we had a woman named Emily Victoria on, who was not a member of the church, but dated a member of the church, something that is extraordinarily rare if you're following the cult. We never call it, but I just did that. And today, we are going to sort of continue that, nibbling on the edges of the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church. Our guest today has a podcast. It's called The Wicked Podcast. He's also a former religious extremist himself, a former member of the Plymouth Brethren, but not the same sect as the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church. But I know he's got a lot to say, excuse me, about what it's like to be in a cult and to sort of see both sides of that fence between being inside and being outside. So would you please welcome to the show? His name is Mike Moore. Mike, how are you, buddy?
I'm great. How you doing, James?
I'm doing very well. So first of all, how did we find each other? Because I think, were you tuning into the Plymouth Brethren stuff on my podcast, or were you tuning into the Get a Life podcast? How did we find each other?
I saw you online. I was doing a podcast, kind of deconstructing having been raised in a relatively moderate Brethren group, and I found out about these crazy Brethren people, and that we'd only heard rumors of, and I wanted to know more about them, and I've met a lot of them online.
You told me before going on air that there is a sort of Plymouth Brethren spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain that to me?
Yeah. Basically, in the early 1800s, sorry to go back so far in time, but there's people who were dissatisfied with being regular Catholics or regular Anglicans or whatever, and they'd say, well, Sunday, we're also going to do our own stuff. And they would form all these different little communities, and it's one of those. So it was a bunch of mostly Irish Anglicans that did their own Bible studies and their own things. And at first, it wasn't supposed to be church specific. You could go to whatever church you wanted, and then you do stuff with them, Bible studies and this kind of thing. But increasingly, it has become more of a church, and it has arguments. They split and split and split, and usually the split, one side is more lenient and one side is more strict. And the one that you're most familiar with is the strictest one I've ever heard of.
How does it differ from, okay, so you were born inside your what is it, like cult light? Is it a sect?
Yeah.
Like, how would you call it?
Yeah, I mean, I'd go so far as to say there were things that are a bit culty, but there's a few key features that it doesn't have in common with the PBCC. Okay. That, for instance, it doesn't have any kind of a global leader who has any control over anybody. Mm-hmm. So even though it could get very strict in your neck of the woods and people's lives would be very controlled by the locals, there's no sort of global thing. So that's better, I think.
Yeah. So give me an idea then of what it was like for you growing up, because you were born into it. And if it wasn't as extreme as the PBCC, but what was the day-to-day like for you?
Well, I've found when talking to people with fairly strict Jehovah's Witness parents or Mormon parents, Orthodox Jewish parents, Sikh, Muslim, whoever's got strict parents who really want to do what a religion says, it's like that. So if you're in a regular church, you get Christmas, and you get Christmas presents, and you get Santa. Well, I didn't get Christmas. I got presents, but we weren't allowed to call them Christmas presents. And if I had been in the PBCC, there would have been no presents. So I'm kind of in the middle there of, I wasn't allowed to dress up for Halloween, but we gave out candy to other kids at Halloween, but I wasn't allowed to dress up. Oh, PBCC, there'd be no candy for anybody. So, right. I got birthdays, they got no birthdays. So it's, and if you talk to people who are in Jehovah's Witness or anything like that, a lot of little things like Mormons can't have coffee, or, Jews can't have bacon, Muslims can't have alcohol, there's things. But there's things that kind of make you shake your head, though. There's mainstream culture, and then there's things that you raise your kids and you don't want them to be able to sort of move freely in their regular culture.
Yeah. Were you shielded from pop culture and things like that?
Yeah. Like the thing that really stung for me, and this is before internet, was music. Yeah, of course. So you don't want any of that music that has any kind of guts to it. It better be some real easy listening Lawrence Welk stuff or some Christian stuff that's not rock and roll. When I was 5, Dad got rid of the TV because the TV had all sorts of bad stuff on it. So a lot of heavy control. So no movies, no going to high school dances, basically no partying. If it's about partying or entertainment, I think you had mentioned before we came on, but not following your heart, not trusting. If it feels good, you should sacrifice that to God.
Yeah. How old were you when you started to think, yeah, this isn't for me?
I wasn't conventional. Like most people, what they do is they would start rebelling and sneaking around and stuff. I started arguing. So my problem wasn't so much that I was looking at them and saying, this isn't for me. I was like, you guys are full of bullshit, is what's going on here. Because what I do is I would listen to what they said, I'd look at what they did, listen to what they said, and then I'd look at what they told me to do. And I'm a bit obsessive about finding contradictions and hypocrisies. And also, I grew up memorizing the Bible from before I could read. People would read the Bible to us and we'd memorize it. So I knew the Bible inside and out like you're supposed to. And they weren't doing that stuff. I could tell. That's why I had a problem with them, because the Bible is part of wisdom literature. Wisdom literature is about asking more questions, not about stopping thinking. Wisdom literature is about, for the rest of your life, trying to work out your stuff your way privately with the understanding that you'll find a new thing now and again. What organized religion, of course, would do, which they're doing to us, is shut off the thinking, just shut up, stop thinking, here's the answer, now you're done. Do you agree with us? And that is not wisdom.
Yeah, and it led you eventually, and we'll go back to some of your stuff in your childhood, but it led you eventually to write this book. I Was a Teenage Pharisee, Lying Hypocrite, Offspring of Vipers, Whitewashed Tomb. What does that mean, that subtitle?
Okay, so I'm quoting Jesus there. So when
really?
Jesus, so we had to memorize this stuff. So when Jesus was walking around, there was women, there was people from Ethiopia, there was people who were Greeks or Romans, all sorts of people who weren't Jews. And he was basically saying, treat everybody the way they'd want to be treated, sort of accept everybody. I mean, he was a Jew and they're being Jewish, but he was saying the proper, wise way is to tolerate everybody. And he didn't criticize people, but there was this one group, and this was the religious right of his time. And they were Pharisees. So the Pharisees, it was performative. So basically, he coined the word hypocrite. It's a Greek word, Hippocrates. So what it means is actor, like wearing a mask, because they would wear a mask and they would do these plays. And so what he was saying is when these guys do religion, it's an act. It's for show. They're doing it for you to see.
Like a televangelist kind of thing?
Yeah, well, he was noticing they would do things like if they're going to pray, it wouldn't be private. They'd actually hire a guy to ring a bell saying they're going through the streets, they're going to pray, check them out, they're going to pray. And he'd say, don't do that. Make it a private spiritual thing. Like don't make it a show. That cheapens it, it ruins it. If you're going to pray, do it in your room privately. So that basically that's
it's like ancient. Sorry, I don't mean to. Well, I guess I do mean to cut you off.
Go ahead.
But
you got
I guess it's sort of like ancient virtue signaling.
Absolutely. I think that people don't change a lot. And so when I look around me today, I see terrifying echoes of where with me, it was my Plymouth Brethren aunts looking over your shoulder and wondering if that music or that joke or that movie was problematic or offensive and maybe you wouldn't be allowed to do it. There's a lot of middle-aged women who are doing that nowadays who it's not for religious reasons, but it's the same psychological makeup that makes you go around wrecking people's fun, essentially.
It would be really fun to go to like church back in the day in your upbringing and just bring a ghetto blaster and just put it down in the middle of the pew and just play Two Live Crew. Hey, we want some pussy, just to see what would happen. You know?
No, I'd be more like I'd be bringing some Rage Against the Machine.
Yeah, that would work too. I mean, how many times can you say "fuck you"? I won't do what you tell me. But the context
that's
is perfect.
The song. Yes, yeah. And I mean, ultimately, my cousin, who's now a very annoyingly preachy atheist, after being raised Plymouth Brethren, because that's what it does, but he quite wisely said that that kind of upbringing raises kids who are liars or rebels. Either they're sneaking around doing stuff and then pretending they're holy church people, or they're just, fuck you, I won't do what you tell me. And I wasn't really typical. I was the one that would say, okay, you want me to follow the rules? Let's sit down and have a chat about those rules and where they came from and what you exactly expect from. And you'll be unsurprised to hear that they don't want to have that conversation. They don't want to explain themselves.
Yeah, I don't remember what TV show it was, or maybe it was a movie. But it was about a Jewish guy who, when he was a kid, he was talking about how he would always give the rabbis a hard time. And his mom comes in once, and he's like, your son, he's questioning the Torah. He's saying that there's things in there that don't make sense. And the mom was like, well, do they? Do you have a point?
Right.
You know, what were your parents like?
I think they're pretty. I use the word simple, not to say they're stupid, but they're simple in the sense that they just went along and they trusted. They really thought that if we do what's expected of us, we will be valued members of this group. And in fact, like any human group, there was last names. You had to have the right last name. You had to have a certain amount of money. That stuff covered a multitude of sins. And so if you wanted to break the rules, you got the right last name, your dad's the right guy, you got some money, you could break a lot of rules.
Yeah, that's the hypocrisy is really the main thing. I think whenever I think of religious people, devout, pious, I fucking hate that word. If someone ever introduced someone to me and said, "Oh, you'll love him. He's very pious," and I
Yeah.
immediately will write that person off.
You know
I
the
probably
word that Steve you know the word that Stephen Fry used to criticize virtue signaling is the word sanctimonious, which is
yeah.
very similar. That sanctimonious means you have this self-satisfaction that you're better. And so you just use the word hypocrite. And part of me writing the book about Pharisees was Jesus coined the word just for them, hypocrisies. And we use the word to mean that they have contradictions. We use the word to mean that they don't follow their own rules. What he was saying, he didn't care whether they follow their own rules or not. He was saying, you have all these rules to put on some kind of a virtue signaling performance, and this is not good. And he broke character a lot to tell everybody, you got to be better than those guys. Those guys are supposed to be the good guys. You got to do better than that. That's
Where
not good.
where did you grow up?
I grew up in Smith Falls, Ontario, so
Smith
just outside
Falls,
of
so
Ottawa.
an escarpment town. Oh no, Smith Falls. Why am I thinking it's an escarpment town? Sorry.
No, it's about 40 minutes from Ottawa.
Okay. And as you got older, you were rebellious. You were questioning the doctrine or the take on the religion, the take on Christianity that you were brought up with. What are your beliefs now, if any?
Well, the answers turn to questions in a good way, and I'm pretty philosophical, I guess people say, and so I've recently been redefining what I mean by the word belief and what I mean by the word faith.
Oh,
I think a lot of these words we invert the meaning. So something that Jean Piaget is famously quoted as saying that people don't have ideas, ideas have people. And I think that's kind of how it is. And so if you find that you gravitate to optimistic worldview or pessimistic or the pursuit of wisdom or hedonism, whatever you do, I don't think you pick that. I don't think you get argued into that. I don't think you get convinced of that. I don't think that's a reasoned decision. I think that you just find that it's in you, that it meshes with you. So when it comes to me, I'm pretty sure there's a God of some kind. I'm also pretty sure that nobody knows much about him if there is a God. And I'm very comfortable to think about there not being a God and there being a God. That's totally fine with me. And I don't need to defend the belief or whatever. But I'm very open to the idea that, yeah, there probably is a God, I imagine. I'm also aware that it's odd that I even have that, given what I've been through. Most people in my position, like cousins of mine, they're big time atheists, and I like Christopher Hitchens as much as the next guy.
I love
Definitely wish that Richard Dawkins had died instead of him. I'm afraid, but Richard Dawkins is no Christopher Hitchens. And you know why Christopher Hitchens was so cool?
I know several reasons, but please go ahead.
His
Yes.
brother,
Yeah. Did
he
you see
grew
that
up
debate?
arguing. Yes,
Yeah.
growing up arguing with Peter Hitchens, and so on the one hand, he didn't pull any punches. On the other hand, he knew what he's talking about, and he had a lifetime of experience talking about these things, and you got to respect that.
I
He was funny.
enjoy the I guess I do it maybe on an annual basis now. I used to be, oh my God, at the beginning, I was like, so I got to know Christopher Hitchens in the digital sense. Sorry, let me rephrase that. I got to know of Christopher Hitchens in the digital sense, I guess in like 1996 or 97. And I would see him on, what's it called? The Press, Meet the Press.
Mhm.
And I would see him on public television in the States. And I was just like, who is this snarky British guy That's just tearing the shit out of Bill Clinton. This is
Yeah.
amazing. I love this. And then I don't remember what year, it might have been 99 or something, when the missionary position came out, which was his critique of Mother Teresa, which is hilarious. Just the title alone, you just buy it for that. And then when 9/11 happened and the war in Iraq happened, and I watched, he's actually the reason why I am so comfortable telling people, and it's true, I'm not a progressive, I'm not a conservative. All that shit can fuck off, because sometimes I might lean a little left on an issue, sometimes I might lean a little right on an issue, and I don't want to be put in a box. And when Christopher Hitchens came up with his list of reasons as to why he supported the Iraq war, even though I strongly disagreed with him, I was like, finally, a person on that side of the argument that's making a cogent argument as to why they feel the way they feel.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like so we're kind of sidetracking here, but I like the way the conversation's going, because we missed his voice during the Trump years.
Yep.
In fact, I don't even know how popular he would have been if Christopher Hitchens was alive in 2014, 2015, 2016. I'm not even sure Trump would be president. That's how powerful that guy's voice was.
And I mean, I grew up, as you know, with tribalism, where you have to all have the same opinion. And it's about continually having these little tests to make sure that you are legitimately a member, that you're legitimately, you still think correctly and having your thinking checked. So I'm done with that. Things that I'm done with after, because I had to go to church 5 times a week, right? So at least 5 hours of church every single week. I had that instead of a childhood.
It's like fucking
memorizing,
waterboarding a child. Jesus.
Yes. And so now I don't care what your thing is. If you want to preach at me, I can tell when I'm being preached at, and it's like, no, I'm not going to sit and listen to you preach to me.
Yeah. I don't blame you. Is it, so I want to go back to the religious stuff though for a second. So you sometimes think there is a God and sometimes you think there isn't. Before you answer, I just want to tell you, I don't think there is one, but I'm not as militant as I used to be, because once I start going down that rabbit hole, and this is hardly unique, but I don't know how something comes from nothing. But even the answer God doesn't satisfy me.
No.
I don't know how all of this started. I don't know why we're here. I don't know why whatever created us, what created that thing, and so on and so on and so on. And it makes me feel excited not to know the answer to that question.
I have a lot of sympathy with agnostics. Most of the agnostics I talk to are really kind of atheists. They're pretty much saying, I don't think there's a God, but I don't think I can prove there's not a God. And I'm kind of the opposite, that I think there's a God, but I definitely can't prove there's a God. And I don't think anyone can. I don't believe it's possible to prove there's a God. And so for me, it's like the weather. You look inside yourself, what do you believe? You have to look and see what you believe, and it's news to you, and you don't choose it, and you definitely aren't following it because of reason and logic. Anyone who thinks that their personal beliefs, that they were argued into them, they were not.
Yeah, it's very strange. And the older I get, I don't soften on religion. I soften on believers. Because I used to be pretty mean to people that believed when they wanted to engage in talking about religion. Because I would always warn them first. I would just be like, I'm going to tell you exactly how I feel, but I'm not attacking you. I'm attacking the ideas that you're talking about, which you didn't invent. So I hope that's okay. It was never okay. And so eventually I kind of just stopped talking about religion.
We start out that way. We start with mean-spiritedness and mocking, which is not mature, but that's what a 20-year-old does. And so I was actually, the reason why I picked up on that wicked person is that's a Bible verse that justifies shunning me globally for the rest of my life, because I wrote a parody of a church outreach pamphlet when I was 23, because I was right on board with South Park, Family Guy, Simpsons. We're all about mocking. Let's take something and go, you're like this, and like, haha. And, Saturday Night Live and all of that was about mocking stuff. And by the time Trump was trying to get elected for the first time, I kind of looked and said, is this seriously your guys' weapon, Democrats? Like, you don't want him to get elected and your main weapon is mockery? You think that's going to fix the world? Because that's been tried. And that did not work for Generation Xers. Mockery has not done anything but make us laugh. And hopefully we're outgrowing it slightly. Sometimes you got to have serious points and say them seriously.
That's very true, and I do blame The Simpsons and South Park and things like that for creating a massive sect of cynicism inside Generation X. Like
Hmm.
our language was sarcasm and jadedness when we
Yep.
were growing up. And I remember when I went to college, I was raised in Whitby, born in Montreal, raised in Whitby, and I went to college at Niagara College. So I lived in like Welland, which was awful. I don't recommend that to anybody for anybody. But when I was there, my roommate and I, a guy who I'm still friends with to this day, Dave, I've known him since I was like 6 or 7. Uh, After a month or whatever, the girl that I was seeing just turns to us and is like, "You guys are really negative." And I remember her saying that, and I remember at first I was about to just start cutting her up because that's what we did back in the day, right? We just busted balls. And then I kind of stopped myself and I was just like, I think she's right. I think we're negative people. And, and it took me a while to sort of get out of that. Are you finding that in adulthood that there is a lot more of a rewarding, there's more of a reward to not have stringent beliefs, or do you think for some, or just for yourself, that it's actually sort of like, ironically, a blessing?
Well, I mean, for me, my beliefs were my own, and although my group wanted to control them, the problem was that they couldn't. And I had competing beliefs to them. It wasn't that I was a no to their belief package. In the comments, some clever people have said that most churches are still performative. Then, yeah, and talking about control, yeah, they're about that, and so totally agree with this. And because the famous saying that we don't organize sex, so why do we organize religion? Um, because yeah, it's something you should do naturally. It should be a thing where you express yourself in a way that's deep and personal. And the idea of a church and like a global thing that you police people to make sure that they talk and live the proper way. Um, this is weird. It's not how it's supposed to be.
How's it supposed to be?
Like I said, it's supposed to be like sex. It's supposed to be personal. It's supposed to be something that you don't invite people into your bedroom to watch. It's supposed to be a thing that's not performative. That's the most personal thing about you that says more about who you are. It's news to you who you are. You spend your whole life working it out. That's
Yeah,
what it's
you know
supposed
what?
to be.
I agree with that. Before we go on, I just want to let Jen Waddell
Yeah.
know. Yeah, I totally just fanboyed Hitch, and I'll do it probably till my dying breath
And
because,
so did I.
yeah. Um, the the idea of prayer, the thing that always got me about the Christians who were battling against municipal or provincial governments or whatever it was this is the United States and Canada, to include prayer in school was always so hilarious to me, because the overriding thought that I had is like, what is stopping you from praying?
It's also
It
directly against the specific teachings of Jesus in the book of Matthew, who said, "Don't do that."
is that the heed to Caesar verse?
No, it's
No.
the King James translation is "Go and pray in your closet." It's what I was referring to before, and closet just means your bedroom. So it's basically saying, pray in your bedroom. Don't go do it publicly. Don't make a show of it.
Prayer and masturbation together at
Right,
last.
exactly. The sex and the religion. But basically, yeah, the idea is that with something like prayer, if we see you doing it, the question is, well, you're just doing it so I can watch, aren't you? Like
Well,
when I
you're
was a
also doing it so you can indoctrinate. Like that whole
yes,
prayer in
you are.
school is about the collective, right? It's not
Yes, it
about the
is.
individual.
Hmm.
But I
It's not
always say,
supposed to be
I
like
was
that.
always saying to people, like I knew people that wanted to pray in school, and I was like, so fucking pray already. Like,
Right.
no, who cares? Oh, well, it's not the same if everyone's not doing it. I'm like, well, then it's not really about you. It's about you wanting us to be like you.
Yeah, and the idea of synchronized prayer, I've never heard of that before either.
Yeah, that is
For
weird,
me,
isn't
it's
it?
very private. I mean, if prayer is a thing for somebody, it's going to be a very personal thing, very individual thing. It's not going to be something you can do in a group of 50 people.
Do you ever feel that prayer is like, because I always had a problem with it because of the worshiping part, or almost like you're trying to get a genie to grant you some wishes, like you're praying for your mother to pull out of the coma, and it's just like,
Right.
the fuck do you think this is? Like,
What I would connect it to, because I've struggled with that, obviously. Because if he's omnipotent and can do whatever he wants, why does he care? I have to ask him first before I get stuff? Like, that doesn't make sense.
I don't think he can
So,
do whatever he wants if he exists. I think
right.
it's like watching a TV show, or
I
putting
agree
the
with
bread in the petri dish and watching the mold grow, but not being able to stop it unless
I
you
agree with
crush
you.
it.
It's like any nerd property like Doctor Who or Star Trek or whatever, that there's protocols. If there is a God, he
The
doesn't
prime
just do what
directive.
he doesn't.
Yeah.
Yes, God has some equivalent. But when it comes to this, the idea of blessing in the sense of wishing people well, I think that's something our culture could revisit. We do a lot of cursing. Like, fuck you. That's the first thing we think. But do we wish people well? We say goodbye. We don't even know that means God be with you. We know via con Deus means God go with you or go with God. But the idea of, I like you, so I wish you success in your day. Your mom is sick, so may that go well. That's a ancient Jewish, Christian, Muslim thing of putting a blessing on somebody personally. It's just well wishing. We don't do that enough. And the idea of, I'm actually going to ask God to do it and hope he does. Maybe he won't, but I'm going to ask. I think that's a touching gesture to do for a human being.
Yeah, I don't know if I don't know. I see where you're coming from. I don't know if I necessarily agree. I think it's something to say. Hey, wish you well. Have a good one. Like, I mean, I think it's just a figure of speech by now. If you really want to make a difference in someone's life, in my personal opinion, when they walk away, you should be like, make good decisions
Yeah.
or something like that.
Well, and the blessing equivalent of that is, may you make good decisions. If you put may you in front of it, it makes it a blessing.
You sound like my grade 2 teacher, Mrs.
Right.
Diamond. She used to say things just like that. She had a bun
Really?
too.
Sorry
And her
about that.
And her bun had she had a bun holder. You know what that is?
Really?
It
Is
was
it
like
like
made out of like pewter wire kind of
I've
thing. and
never
she
seen
stuffed
that.
her bun in it. It was very odd.
Jen just said, say I love you. Well, yeah. I mean, that dudes are a bit squeamish with that, but that's essentially what it is. Like, may things go well for you. Women do something, but mostly women, that always surprises me. You go up to them and you say, I'm sick. And they say, oh, I'm so sorry. And I'm thinking, well, they didn't make me sick. Why are they apologizing? And they literally mean, I'm sorry that this thing that wasn't my thing happened. And you can do that in a negative or a positive direction. You can say, may you get better. And I'm sorry that you're not well. And this is all a way of saying I love you, isn't it? Really?
It's so interesting that you said that. I just watched something not too long ago, but it was talking about how just these small tweaks of the way that we can turn a phrase can change an entire vibe of a conversation. Like, if, for example, if we're talking about prayer in school, and say you're for it and I'm against it, and you say something like, it gets people to sort of come together at the beginning of the day and start their day, in a positive direction or whatever. And even if I disagree with that, instead of saying, yeah, but, you say yes, and you can make the exact same point, and the person won't feel like they have to be defensive. And I try to use that now as much as I can, because I used to be a very vicious arguing kind of person. I don't feel like I am anymore. I know that Jen's going to say something right now, but I don't really feel like I'm much of an argumentative person anymore. Because, first of all the arena is social media now, and there's almost no point. You ever
Right.
tried to be nice on social media?
Yeah, it doesn't work.
It fucking doesn't work at all. It
No.
really doesn't. Because everyone thinks you're being cheeky.
Yeah,
Right?
and I mean, no one can read what your intent is, and people like to imagine they can read your mind and tell you what they think your intent is.
Okay. Like, for example, Jen Waddell says, also patriarchy, because we take on emotional labor. But yes, this is referring, I guess, to women saying things like, I'm sorry. I would disagree with basically every syllable in that sentence, but I used to be mean about it, and now I can just say Jen Waddell happens to be incorrect. Just kidding.
Well, you know what a teenage Pharisee does?
What?
I see a bunch of religious language from someone else's religion, and I respect it and leave it alone. I
Really?
just saw a bunch of little words that could have told me someone was Jewish or Jehovah's Witness or Plymouth Brethren, and I said, oh, there's a whole belief system, and it doesn't resonate with me, a bunch of it. I can sympathize, but generally speaking, someone basically just started talking Jesus speak. And I said, okay. And I left it alone.
Yeah.
Other things I can respond to, like Stone Child Creations asked, why waste time worrying about it? And that's a very loaded question.
How so?
Well, I get that a
Well,
lot.
I don't know if it's loaded. I think I agree with what you're saying. I would just disagree with that because first of all, I don't think you're worrying about it. I think
No,
you're thinking about it,
I'm
right?
writing books about it, but
Yeah.
and writing songs about it. And some people would say, well, why are you doing that? Why don't you write songs about drinking whiskey? It's like, I can do that too, but I'll do what I want. Thank you. And so essentially why? Well, it interests me. And I've got lots of good reasons why it interests me. The other thing is that it affects a lot of people besides me, and it's not really in the past. And so, like I said, everywhere I turn, despite the fact that I'm not a member of my Plymouth Brethren assembly with my aunts looking over my shoulder to see what movies I'm watching,
Yeah.
there's other people looking over my shoulder to see what movies I'm watching. And, when I first watched South Park and there was like Kyle's mom, I recognized that character. The world is filled with Kyle's moms right now.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
So what are we
Dad
going to
too.
do about Kyle's mom? There's a question. How do you treat Kyle's mom?
Yeah. It's a funny thing to be like I guess she's my ex mother-in-law. Woohoo. Now she's religious, and we kind of had it out once because my kids are not going to be raised to be religious. And people are always like, don't you think they should have to make the choice? And I'm like, yeah, when their frontal lobe fully develops, they can go ahead and decide to make a choice. But until then, I will tell them, and I have told them since they were like in utero, that, some people believe in God, daddy doesn't, and here's why. And I tell them.
Mhm.
So now my daughter's like, Daddy, is it okay that I don't believe in God, but I believe in heaven? I'm like, sure, that's what you
Yeah.
want to do. There's nothing wrong with that. But when they asked me about God, like my son came home once and started talking about how like somebody at school was talking about Jesus and this and that, and he was trying to, because they take on the data that they get and they try to expel it from their brains as if they're professionals on the matter. That's what
Yeah.
kids do. And so
Yeah.
he comes home, he's like, Dad, God sees all and he knows exactly what's going on. And I'm like, whoa. Where did you get this stuff? And some
Mhm.
kid at school said it or whatever. And so, we talked for like 10, 20 minutes about it. And, by the time we were done, he was back to being a good old atheist again. But, I don't think it's fair for children to have to make a choice between
No.
omnipotence and a lack of omnipotence when their little brains can't fucking figure out why the why the spider monkey throws his shit at people. It just they don't
There's
know.
so many things. The thing that I didn't hear enough at church that would be one of the most spiritual things you'd hope from a human being is I don't know, and I'm trying to figure it out. I think you put those two things together. I don't know, and I'm trying to figure it out. I'm still thinking about it. I will think about it for the rest of my life. This is something that's genuinely something I can respect. So when I
That's
was a
so
kid,
Socratic, right? That's Socrates. The wisest are
so,
those that know they don't know.
somewhat.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Jesus quoted him saying that very thing in the Bible. But and so did Paul the Apostle. But probably quoting through Jewish teachers though. But when I was a kid, I was told with authority by my church that we wouldn't be alive today. Like the world would have burned up into a crisp, right? The world was going to burn. And then I move on from my church, and Al Gore told me exactly the same thing. The polar ice caps weren't going to be there in 1998, and now we got Greta Thunberg, and it's doomsayers, end of the world, everything's going to die. I don't need to know, and I don't. And I'd be the first to say, what shape is the world going to be in 10 years? I have no idea. Hopefully, I'll still be alive, and I'll find out with the rest of you.
Carl Sagan had a pretty good idea. I think it was 1995 or something when he said that he sees a world where the dumbing down of knowledge will be front and center, where we won't be thinking anymore because machines will be thinking for us and all that kind of stuff. It was right when the internet came out that he wrote this.
Hmm.
I think it was an essay, and he kind of nailed it. I think we're finding out a couple of things that are going to be hard for economists mostly to swallow, I think, which is that the internet started off as a defense tool for the United States military. Then, of course, it was brought out to the world. Social media was probably that first stamp because I remember chat rooms and social media threads are nothing alike. Chat rooms were chat rooms where people like you and I would go and talk the way that we're talking right now. There were no fronts. It wasn't like an IG world where we had to put on the best fronts in order to like whatever or make ourselves look really smart. But then algorithms got put on top of social media, and now I don't know why there isn't more of a pushback from governments just against algorithms, or why we can't opt out of the algorithm at any time that we want on Facebook or Twitter or wherever, Instagram, doesn't matter. And I think we're going to find out, and I think we already know that algorithms are really the biggest problem as far as the internet goes right now. And AI, I have no idea because I'm not smart enough to know about AI, but that feels like another one that we're going to put on top of that, and it's going to spell danger for all of us.
I mean, I use IMDb as my, who's the actor in the thing, quick reference. And it always wants me to make an account and log in. And I'm always kind of glad that you don't have to, because with everything else you have to. I don't want IMDb. IMDb doesn't need to know who I am. I need to know who was the actor in The Wire. I don't need it to know who I am. And I don't need it to suggest things. Like YouTube wants to know who I am. And it's crazy to every now and then YouTube thinks I'm French and starts showing me French stuff or whatever it is. It's funny to watch it, get it wrong.
Michel Moore.
Yeah. Yes. It's creepy.
It's hard to Google you because it's only Michael Moore shit that comes up.
That's right. Yeah. Nothing but jokes when I cross the border to the States.
Oh, really?
It's a problem because if I want to have like an author, I've used pen names and things, but
do you cross in Detroit? Because then you're just like, hey, welcome home, Mike.
I have. And yeah, usually no matter what the politics of the border guards are, they always make some kind of joke. They're like, are you going to make a documentary about us or something?
So funny. So what's on tap for you then? So tell me about your podcast, first of all.
That's an interesting question because to begin with, I did an audiobook of the book that you see back there. Was this big thing where I essentially realized that with the internet, I could write a book with my thoughts, and then I could sort of seed in all the different thoughts and responses of random people on the internet who had a similar background. And this is where I met all the people from the different kinds of brethrens and things. And someone said, make an audiobook of it. I was thinking, well, that's insane. But then I did it, and I realized this is better. Even though you sort of can't show visual things like photographs and charts and stuff, you can sing songs, you can let people read their own quotes. And so pretty much that became a podcast. I wrote a lot of songs while I was working my stuff out in my 20s. And I'm never going to be famous for them, and the world, like, everything's a drop in the bucket. But I wanted something that would make me work on the music. And so I thought, it's not like a regular podcast. What I thought I would do is I would take what should have been an album and say, here's a song, and it's all about hypocrisy. Well, I'm just going to say all my thoughts about hypocrisy. And that was kind of like season 1, that each episode of the podcast ends with a song. The first part is what I'm thinking, what was going on that made me write this song. And then the next part is how I recorded it. Did I get a guy from Ottawa to play blues lead guitar with me, or what happened musically? And then here's the song. And what I quickly started doing in different seasons after that is just getting people to come in and tell me, verbally what they had to say on different topics. So rather than an interview like this is like a normal podcast, what I do is go through and pull out quotes on all the different topics and seed them into the different podcast episodes that address those topics. And so that's what I have.
That's interesting. And they're small. They're like micro podcasts.
They used to be really small, and they got huge. The more people I put in, the more they had to say. And I had, like you had Emily on yesterday. Yep. And when I have her on, she's got a story. And it became a growing thing that as I did the episodes, as episodes went by, new things would happen in her life that she would tell me. It's like, oh, you're back with this guy, or you guys are sneaking around, behind the church's back again. Oh, you met with
so you got the real time story, the chapters absolutely. In real time. That's amazing. Because she was on yesterday. For those listening at home, I think I'll encourage you to go check out Mike's podcast. It's called the Wicked Podcast, right?
That's right. Spelled with the 2 Ks.
Yeah.
Make it sound more hip hop.
Did you put Emily Victoria?
No, she was actually using a pseudonym because I think there was a fair bit of hope that she could get back with the guy, and that maybe she could join or he would leave. And one of the things that, if we want to use the C word, the really rude C word, cult, if you want to use that word. Yeah, no, the really rude C word is cult. Now, apparently. It's cult.
Cult.
And so when in my podcast, I censor it
Cleveland?
lightly.
Is it Cleveland?
It could be. Some people it's conservative, oddly. But yeah, with Emily, she didn't want her name, so we didn't use her name. But you can sort of tell with the accent and the voice. But what she learned the hard way, and what really, despite all the propaganda, you can't join that group. You just can't. And if you
It's
leave
been
that
done,
group,
I've
you're
been told.
done.
It's been done a few times. And
Not
usually it's a family that is higher up on the
mhm.
caste system that they sort of have in the localities.
Yeah,
And it's usually something like that, where they don't want to say no to the person because they're influential or their
but she
kid or
can't.
whatever.
She
Yeah.
can't, and people like her can't. Regular people, it's not the sort of a church, to use another rude C word. It's not the sort of a church Christian community where you walk in and everyone's like, "Welcome." You can't even go in. So
No, you
she
can't.
she wanted to join, and she never got to attend a church service because you can't.
Yeah, and
That's friggin'
it's really
creepy.
interesting. Like there's I'm having on someone tomorrow. Her name is Floss. She's from, I think it's New Zealand, could be Australia. Really sorry. I have a hard time distinguishing the accents between
Yep.
New Zealand and Australia, but I'm pretty sure it's Australia. And she was telling me that she worked for a UBT company as like a an events producer for when they did their big giant ceremonious events. And I was like, and but then she couldn't actually go to the event that she produced.
Right.
And I was just like, first of all, I find it very strange that they would hire an outsider to do that specific job. And then, of course, she enlightened me on something that now seems painfully obvious, which is nobody inside the cult knows how to do that job.
Right.
You know, like how do you become an events producer if you're a member of the PBCC when you can't break bread with people, you don't know what music people like because you can't listen to music, you can't watch TV, you're probably drunk half the time, you know, or having babies or something.
And no
And it was
members can be teachers. So if you want to have a brethren school, which they do have around here, none of the teachers are going to be brethren, like not that kind of brethren, because they're not allowed to go to school and become teachers.
yeah, or when they feed the firefighters, but they can't eat with them.
Right. And they don't let them go inside the church building. So they set up a tent out in the parking lot, this kind of stuff. So my group is nowhere like that. I'll tell you the
Yeah,
cultiest thing that my group did that is like that, but not as bad. You know, those like summer religious youth camp things
yeah.
that they have? There's one around here. It's like all the churches have it. It's called Red Pine Camp. It's on Golden Lake or Silver Lake. I can never remember with all the lakes we have around here.
Sounds molesty. Go on.
Yeah, yeah. It sounds like Jason Voorhees might come up out of that lake. And but anyway, it was like you go there and you do canoeing and stuff. But anyway, what they would have is the
Ladies and
people,
gentlemen, if you see Theo Fleury's name carved into a bunk bed, just get the fuck out of there. Sorry, I
right?
shouldn't joke about that.
But yeah, when they what you do is you'd book a week, and kids could go from all different churches, meet Christians from all different churches, and the people who would be emptying the garbage and cooking the food, serving the food, and teaching would all be the same people, and they'd all be from different churches, and they'd all work together. Well, that's not the Plymouth Brethren way. So what we did when I was a teenager was we would come in and basically say, "Can we book it for a week where there's only us there, like no other Christians, and you guys can empty the garbage, you can cook the food, but you can't teach us shit because we want to get it right. We don't
Yeah.
trust you guys." So I would stand there beside a garbage pail watching a guy who just emptied the garbage pail and find out he was like this pastor with like a PhD in divinity. He's emptying the garbage and he wasn't allowed to teach us anything because he wasn't from the right Christian group. That wasn't right.
Wow. That's kind of rewarding in its own way, though.
I guess it was
Yeah.
weird. It was just the sort of thing that made me
Or
look and
like
say,
what
this
it's
is
like
not right.
seeing a cab driver who was a doctor in Pakistan or something.
Kind
You know?
of.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's where you don't give people the respect that they should have. And I would talk to them. We weren't probably supposed to, but I would have more fun talking to outside Christians than inside Christians because I knew every single thing that inside Christians were going to say
Yeah.
before they said it.
Well, listen, I've had a lot of fun talking to you today. I could have had you on a while ago. Life has kind of been a little strange for me in the last couple months, as you
Well,
may or may not
may
know.
may it go better.
You know, it's not even that bad. I'm writing a piece right now, and I think I'm going to title it something the power of being alone or something like that, or maybe I'll come up with something better because saying that out loud just made me cringe. But you know, going from living with your family, with your kids and your significant other, to living by yourself has been a very weird chapter because the upsides have been just as the upsides are just as powerful as the downsides.
Mhm.
My career the work that I'm doing on the side, not just the podcast, but the book and other things that I'm doing, just spiked. I credit that, to be perfectly honest, to not having someone in my face all the time telling me how awful I am. So when you get rid of an abusive partner, that's sort of like, that's the upside. The downside is that I'm alone all the time, and I'm not seeing my kids. So I have this really interesting kind of life right now where I'm just sort of dealing with two sides of a coin, and I'm trying to figure out how to navigate the middle. And I seek out advice sometimes, but I'm not the type to seek out advice anymore. And but when I get it, what the best advice is? The unsolicited advice from close friends who are doing it because they care. I don't like getting advice from people that I don't know. But and then you were saying earlier about how men don't say I love you. The interesting thing is that, like Dean Blundell, our fearless leader at this network, whenever we get off the phone, he's just like, I love you, brother. You're my close friend, and I'm fucking thankful to have you as my friend. And
Healthy.
I'm just like, yeah, I feel the same way. And it feels really good. It's like a high five, but for more evolved men.
I think I'm too British for that, but
Yeah, you might be.
what I could say, and to be honest, a lot of people that were raised like me, you don't show your feelings because it's not safe to show your feelings, and there's a lot of monotones in people raised like me, because you don't give it away, because there's appropriate emotional responses and inappropriate emotional responses to things people may say, and you just don't give them anything, because then you can have some privacy. But all I'm going to say about being alone, because I live alone, have a whole song. Probably my most popular song is called I Live Alone. It's on YouTube. You can watch it. People like it because it's honestly about living alone and what that's like. But one thing I've noticed is all of the tyrants of history have had not one, but like 15 women somehow under their control, and a bunch of kids in all directions. And that's tyrants. And the wisest people have very often lived alone in nature, because they needed to be there to get any thinking done.
Like Walden or Diogenes, that kind of thing?
Yeah. And we're talking about any prophetic figure, including Jesus or Muhammad or any of these guys. They always come walking in out of nowhere. They're out in the middle of nowhere, and they come walking into town, and we'll walk in like, hey, did you guys notice all the whatever? And no one noticed the whatever because they live there and they don't see anything. Whereas you got to be an outsider to have the outside perspective to understand anything.
That's interesting. Mike Moore, this is a great conversation. I'm going to have you back, and I really appreciate you coming to join us here on Blackballed. Thank you, man.
Really had a great time.
Have a good night, sir.
All the best.
You too. Yeah, that was fun. Mike Moore, here's his book again, in case anyone wants to go online and order it. His book is called I Was a Teenage Pharisee, Lying, Hypocrite, Offspring of Vipers, Whitewashed Tomb. Really cool artwork on the front too. I should have asked him who did the artwork, because it's pretty dope. That was actually fun. So yes, as I said, tomorrow, her name is Floss, and she is from Australia, and she worked in a cult-owned company for, I think she said, a year and a half, and the stories that she has are just amazing. It's like Plymouth Brethren Week in a sense here. But only people that never belonged to the Plymouth Brethren Christian Church. But people, yesterday we had Emily Victoria, who dated someone from the church. Today we had Mike Moore, who's from sort of like a very lighter version of the Plymouth Brethren crazy cult. And then tomorrow we'll have Floss. And then on Thursday, and I'm super excited, I hope some of my listeners have gone to see this man, Sage Francis, on YouTube. I cannot wait to talk to him. I've been taking in a few of his interviews. I listened to the interview that he did with Brother Ali, and I am just super stoked to speak with him. I feel like we have a lot in common, and in a good way. The idea of listen, there is a biography of white kids who grew up completely enveloped in hip-hop culture, and we all have stories that have a lot of common threads and a lot of differences, but those common threads are eerily similar often. And I can't wait to talk to him. So that'll be on Thursday, and then of course we'll have Casual Friday on Friday. But until then, we will see you next time on Blackballed.
Blackballed. Blackballed. Blackballed. Blackballed. Blackballed. Black.